So, is globalization really dying? Everyone's talking about tariffs and wars and pandemics and saying it's killing globalization. But let me ask you something first. Was it ever a good thing, globalization? In today's episode, we break down why David Ricardo's theory might be obsolete in the age of platform capitalism and AI. We then have this great interview with Josh Dorfman. He runs the Supercool company. He hosts the Supercool podcast, and he is super cool. Exactly, you guessed. He's very optimistic about green transition and innovation. He's got great stories about innovation in this area, so it's an interview not to be missed. Then in this episode, we also look into an open call, the EIC Pathfinder challenges. And don't forget, this month we are running this free trial for the GPT I created, Smart Proposal AI. And let me warn you about this trial. If you try it, you will never ever want to live without it. You will never want to write another proposal without it. I know, I don't want to write any other proposal without it. So if you dare to try it, check the podcast notes for the links to enter that trial. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Bye. So welcome back to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. Thank you for being here and welcome, Josh Dorfman. It's always a pleasure to have someone from a different continent. We had guests from Asia, Africa, Europe, of course, America. I don't know why, but no one from Australia yet. But I'll have to look into that. Josh is joining us from South Carolina, and I guess you are pretty close to the sea. Is it right?
That is fair to say. And thank you for having me on the show. I'm happy to be here and have a chance to talk to you. Yes, we live in a little town called Surfside Beach. It's wonderful, lots of trees, great feel, and it just runs right up to the ocean. It's about a 2 mile wide. I don't know what that is in kilometers, but yeah, it's a little tiny town on the beach.
Okay, great to hear that because I used to live in a place just like this, close to Lisbon. So please tell us a little bit about your activity. You have this company called Supercool, and I was just wondering how cool is that? What do you do?
Well, Supercool is a conversation, a media company focused on climate solutions that are cutting carbon, that are commercialized already at scale, so proven, real world. Uh, and they also typically are profitable or help drive down costs, improve the bottom line. And in the process of doing all that, make life better, improve modern life. So super cool. We're looking for the evidence that says, hey, we're moving to a place where not only are we solving climate, but we're actually doing it in a way that we're going to be excited about because the future is going to be better than the present. And that is possible, that is underway, just often underrepresented in the media. And we really want to bring those stories to life.
Okay, that's a fair point to start with. Is life really gonna be better? Are we really gonna have a good future, or is the climate change irreversible, and is it going to bring hell upon all of us? I usually see only the extremes, one extreme or the other. What's your take?
My view is, of course, we don't dismiss or underestimate the challenge we face globally. This is not to be overly optimistic or Pollyanna-ish, but at the same time, when I look around at the world we live in today and look at the evidence, just in 2024, just last year, $2 trillion was invested globally in clean energy technologies. That's twice as much as went into fossil fuels. I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars, solar, wind, batteries, other technologies, geothermal. When you look at what's happening in Europe, now in America, across the globe, in terms of cities that have adopted climate action plans and really have turned themselves into laboratories for change. That's very exciting. And then when you add on to that, the fact that you've had all of these climate startups, let's say, climate tech startups that have been funded for over a decade. And many of them have advanced from the lab through pilot stage to commercialization, now to scale. I really do believe we've entered a new era where you see solutions that do exactly what we hope. I'll just give you one example. I could probably give you tons of examples because this is what we do all the time. But in America, we have a company called Zoom, Z-U-M. And Zoom, not the video recording, but so Zoom is essentially fixing and modernizing the school bus transportation system in America. I'm not quite sure exactly what that looks like in Europe, but in America, students today have the same school bus experience largely that their grandparents had, almost a century ago. They get on the bus, nobody knows where the bus is. The school doesn't know where the bus is. The parents don't know where the bus is. And in many of the largest school districts in America, students actually arrive late to school when they're taking the school bus. It's ridiculous. And so this company, Zoom, came in and said, we've got a few solutions here. We're going to use some AI to, first of all, we're going to actually like just basically put some trackers on the school bus. We're going to know where it is. Parents can know where it is. The school can know where it is. But now we're going to use AI. We're going to optimize the school bus routes. So kids are going to get to school faster. And if a kid's sick, the parent can go on the app, say, hey, my kid's not going, bus reroutes. In the city of Oakland, California, just outside of San Francisco, it was the first city, this happened last year, the first city in America to have 100% electric school buses. So what does that mean? It means the communities in Oakland no longer have buses with diesel fumes rolling through their communities. That's a lot healthier. It's a lot healthier for the kids. Because of the technology they're using, not only did they bring in electric buses, they reduced the fleet size of buses from 140 to about 70, well, I think it was exactly 72, because they said, none of this is efficient. So now you imagine a future where it's electric, it's healthier, it's getting kids to school on time, there's less stress for everybody in the system, and that is a climate change solution. That's the kind of thing that gets me very, very excited, and I see a lot of in the market today. And by the way, that solution is now in 4,000 schools in America. In many of the biggest school districts in the country, they've said, oh yeah, we're doing Zoom. We're getting that for our system. The growth is phenomenal because it really solves a huge problem.
I love that example, and I will look it up online, of course, because it sounds quite interesting. But it's also a good example for this. I'm going to ask you. It takes a lot of investment. That's a lot of money. How do you fund that kind of investment in America?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's still, there's no one easy answer where the situation is solved. Certainly, for instances like Zoom, venture capital, of course, plays a big role. And the venture capital system still for climate technologies is strong. It's, I mean, it's always hard to raise venture capital. But for the early stages, that ecosystem is very strong in America. Even today, with higher interest rates and some challenges overall for venture capital, those kinds of things can get funded. We have a system where there's grants available, not easy to come by. They're competitive, but grants, I think, similar to what's in the U.S. for technologies as they're, in the very early stages. And then the piece that's very tricky is to figure out how you cross this chasm once let's say you've got a pilot, right? You've got something, and especially if you're trying to solve climate with innovation, because very often that is hard technology, that is physical stuff that you're building,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
doesn't easily fit, at least always, a venture capital model, which was really based on software initially, right? It's
Yeah.
just like um, companies built that are just lighter asset, easier to fund. We went through this personally. Before I started Supercool, I co-founded a company with two engineers who were working at SpaceX. We came
Mhm.
together and we built a company similar, well, it's not similar to Zoom, but a climate tech company called Planted. And what we do is we grow a grass similar to bamboo. It grows extremely fast, much faster than trees. And we
Mhm.
did it because we were like, let's find something that grows faster than trees. We can pull carbon from the atmosphere, pull it down faster, something growing faster than trees. And if we're going to do that and we're going to replace trees, where do trees go in America? They go into new houses as building materials. And a bunch of those materials, like plywood, are made in a factory. So we said, let's go find something that grows faster than trees. We found a grass that grows like 9 times faster than trees. It has great durable structural properties. And then let's go build, because we have SpaceX engineers and they're used to building rocket ships, let's go build a production technology, a factory that has no smokestack, that's electric. And so we don't
Mhm.
give the carbon back in a smokestack, right? We can sequester that carbon in the walls and the roofs and floors of new homes. We started that company 4 years ago. This past fall, so about maybe 5, 6 months ago, the largest home builder in America called D.R. Horton, that builds 1 in every 7 homes in America, gave us an order for 10 million panels. That's the equivalent of about 90,000 new homes. And so we also had to navigate this thing. We raised the venture capital early on, and then we had to figure out how do we raise these next, can we get loans? Are we mature enough history to get loans? And we're right in that area wrestling with exactly this question of how do we finance these next phases? We're doing it. It's hard, takes a lot of energy and effort, especially for these what's called folk first of a kind technologies.
Mhm.
That's a tricky thing. And so there's no one solution. People really have to try and, claw and just really do whatever they can to figure that out.
Well, in a way, this deals with one of the mankind's harder issues to deal with is our aversion to change. Because basically, what you're saying is the construction is an industry has been using the same technologies, the same materials for ever. Hey, now you should use this new material. Now you should change the way you work, the way you live, just because it's better for the environment. And is it cheaper? Is it more expensive? What are the challenges here?
Fernando, yeah, I appreciate that question. The way we thought about this business from the beginning, we said, okay, if we can grow something that grows faster than trees and we can grow in more places and we can put our factory close to the customer and grow close to the customer, then we think we can win in the field on cost. We think we can win in the logistics on cost. And we've built a technology that's modular, meaning like if you think about plywood, or in this country, we use something called oriented strand board, OSB. It's like a chipped ply. It's like it's cheaper basically, but still structural, and it's very very cheap. Like the factories that make that stuff, they're like towns. They're massive, right? We built something that's modular. And so we can put it in any little warehouse in America and have a very different system. And we did all of that to think about cost. So we aim to get to cost competitive, maybe cheaper as fast as we possibly can, but the product is better. It's more moisture resistant, and that's a big deal, moisture in these materials. So we built a better product. We're very cognizant of cost, but one of the keys that we understood early on working with these giant builders is the product has to actually work on a job site exactly the same as the material it replaces. No extra nails, no extra steps. You shouldn't
So
even know any that you're using something different.
you're minimizing change, trying to make
It's
exactly the same. Okay, I see your
ex-
strategy.
yeah. Very often, that's just the one point that I'll make when we look at these new technologies and innovation, it's not even that you're people say, well, who's your competitor? And you can say, okay, well, everyone's our competitor, right? But it's not really the competition you're competing against. What you're competing against is people's willingness to accept mediocrity, right? People's willingness to just suffer a little bit, but
Hmm.
rather suffer a little bit than take the risk of something
Yeah.
new. That's what you're competing against.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Thank you for that. Let me get back to research and the funding model. How do you fund this kind of innovation? Because you're working with, as you said before, with a very physical industry that has to build stuff. That's not always the case. And actually, the earlier example you gave of the buses, the AI component was very, very important. Is it easier to fund this kind of innovation in the States or in Europe? Can you somehow draw a comparison?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think what comes to mind for me is that a number of the important venture capital funds in these areas are European. I think of a fund like 2150, right? That is a decarbonization fund that funds a lot of this physical tech, this hard technology. And I wonder whether there's a more inclination to do that because of maybe the policy environment in Europe, the regulatory environment
Mhm.
in Europe that's really mandating that more of this change is going to come. The US is clearly further behind in that regard. So I think about that. So that may play a role in why I think Europe is doing a very good job in that regard. I just think in the US, the there's of course tons of interest in physical technologies for climate, for defense. Those areas are increasingly important in gaining traction. But if the margin structure doesn't always fit what a venture capitalist is looking for when they think about how are we going to
Mhm.
maximize our exit, how are we going to maximize our return, right? How high margin can this business actually become? It's just different if it's physical infrastructure. And so a lot of thought is certainly going into right now, is venture capital the right model for these kinds of industries that exist in the physical world? Does something else need to evolve? There are certainly a lot of people trying to tackle that question. Can you bring more debt, more bank financing or loans into the picture? Can something like green bonds become available at an earlier phase? Can you do more crowd funding to get other kinds of investors open and interested? There's, like I've said, there's no easy solution. And then on top of that, what we're now seeing also are companies. I was just emailing with a company that raised a very large Series B funding round, and it's really like, in my mind, like an investment bank. Their founder says it's not an investment bank, or they're not. But what they're trying to do is become this central kind of data warehouse source of deal flow, um, to help all sorts of investors to basically like speed up due diligence,
Mhm.
speed up the whole process of getting deals funded to try to move more liquidity into the system. So it's really top of mind right now in America. Like, how are we actually going to do this for these types of industries?
And then there's another issue that I see more and more being discussed, and I really enjoy taking part in that discussion. Is that okay? The states and the EU are gonna replace all school buses with electric ones. Are gonna replace all plywood with these. New materials. Okay, so we are going to save the world. Are we? Because if you only do that in Europe and in the States, that's a small part of the world. So it doesn't stop all the pollution elsewhere. How are you going to finance the rest of the world? And are we going to finance the rest of the world? Uh,
Yeah, I love that question, and I love it from two perspectives. The first perspective is when you think about, we mentioned that $2 trillion invested in
mhm.
2024. the US was 16% of that number. Historic by US standards, 300 billion some odd dollars. Right? Europe was more than the US. Most of that was China, right? And so
Mhm.
China is investing. It's just unbelievable. I mean, China installed more solar capacity in 2024 and in 2023 than the US has in its entire history in just 1 year. Both of them, they did it, both of those years. It was the same. China's building these massive, I mean, unbelievable transmission power lines to take solar from the Gobi Desert and bring it to skyscrapers in Shanghai, right? Like they're, and that's not just about cost, that's about planning, regulatory frameworks, everybody understanding what the future is going to look like and acting. And the US is kind of this, we're a bit of a hodgepodge of different regulatory environments in different states. It's tricky. So you have and then people say, well, but China's still building coal plants, right? So we're not doing anything here in America until they stop doing coal plants. Well, 38% of China's renewable energy in 2024 came from, 38% of the energy came from renewables in China in 2024. The global average is, I believe, 41% for every country. The US was 42%. So China's not that far behind, and they're going really fast, and they're investing like crazy.
Mhm.
Then on the other side, you have what's happening in Africa, where you have some really interesting, lots of entrepreneurial activity, more countries getting involved at the national level to effectively ask the question, well, or basically saying like, hey, you know what, our power grid stinks. Like either it stinks or like we don't even have one, right? We have like
Mhm.
1.2 billion people here. Roughly half the population has access to either like a very unstable grid or no grid at all. And so you have companies that are doing a whole bunch of things, like this company D-Light, which got started about 20 years ago. They're the largest home solar company in the world because they've figured out really durable, affordable solar powered products that can go in, that can reach people in the most remote villages in Africa. They figured out last mile delivery, and now they've
Mhm.
transformed about 180 million lives. So you have that. Then you have a company like Max that does electric motorcycles in Western Africa, teaming up with other companies that do solar mini grids. So you actually have people in Africa charging up their electric motorcycles on solar, right? And the financing models work and a lot's getting figured out. So can that scale? Sure. Is it big enough and is it going to go fast enough to ultimately get us into the future? Well, I'm optimistic that it will grow and grow and grow on top of itself. But certainly the potential's there and certainly the evidence is there that this is possible.
Great. That's great because it leads me to the next question, which is, okay, so we're doing all this transition, as the European Commission likes to say, the transition, the green transition, and we are going to a world where everything is green. But maybe we are not moving fast enough and the climate will change and that will have consequences. Isn't there a huge market coming along to protect a huge market of ways to protect the population from the climate changes? Things like cooling the air or heating the air or making manufacturing food without all the water that it takes. Isn't there a huge market waiting for new technologies to be developed so that we can protect ourselves, basically, from the climate changes?
So in this case, we're talking about technologies or companies or solutions that will generally get lumped into climate resilience or climate adaptation, right? How are we going to adapt to a changing climate? And uh, certainly you do see more and more activity there. There's a company, I believe, called Atmos, which is now set up in the Middle East, and it's another guy who came, I think, from SpaceX, maybe from Tesla, but certainly from that type of company, where he's
Hmm.
developed a technology to essentially, I think, take salt water and he's built these giant towers where it then gets somehow purified and like spread out in a mist in the desert that it makes the land arable and you can farm and crazy stuff, right? So we're seeing this also this sort of sci-fi crazy world coming, and it is very interesting. There's not as much capital flowing into that currently as into so adaptation versus mitigation, right? How do we just decarbonize? The one thing though that I would say about climate finance that is also really important to understand, and I only realized this last week. I talked to this guy Mauricio Rodas, who was formerly the mayor of Quito in Ecuador, and he did incredible work as the mayor of Ecuador. He got the first metro line built, the first subway built in the cities. He really and did it fast in like 3 or 4 years, like really amazing. But he now works on climate finance, and his point is like, hey, 70% of the emissions globally come from cities. Already more than half the population globally lives in cities, and that's going to increase, I don't know, the 2/3, let's say, by 2050. When the global finance system we have today was created in 1944 during the Bretton Woods agreements, right at the end of World War II, and it put nation states, right, countries, right at the center of that system, at a time when the world was not living in cities, when it was not urbanized. And today we have this global finance model that doesn't fit where the capital needs to go and who needs to be making the decisions, which really in many cases is mayors and city leaders, because they're on the front lines, especially when you think about this thing of adaptation. How do we make our cities how do we cool our cities, right? How do we deploy these technologies? And so that's something that a lot of people, and certainly a lot of mayors, are actively voicing up about and saying, hey, we need a seat at the table for a lot of these global negotiations, because cities need to be represented, and we need to figure out how to flow capital to cities.
No, that's very interesting, especially if you consider that nowadays there are many cities that are larger than countries, that have more population than countries. A really large number of cities have 10, 14 more inhabitants, and there are many countries smaller than that. So I think that I like that point. It's an interesting view. Well, I want to ask you if there's any final message you want to leave to people who are considering to work in this area.
Yes, the message that I would share is this is a fantastic time to work in this area. And one thing that's often said, which I disagree with, is that it's often said by people probably around your age or my age, that, oh, the younger generations are going to solve climate. They'll figure it
Yeah.
out, leave it to them. The thing that I see, though, in talking to innovators, startup founders, is that many of the most successful startup founders today who meet this super cool criteria, which we talk about on our podcast and in our newsletter, are in their 50s, are in their 60s, are sometimes even in their 70s. And it's not to say that you have to be that old to be very successful, but they've
Sure.
learned so much, right? The successes and the failures and the tough lessons, to understand, okay, if we're going to go build, as an example, a battery that can store heat and put it next in a factory so you don't have to run these natural gas boilers. This is a company called Rondo and another called Brenmiller. That's crazy. They store heat in or Rondo stores it in like clay bricks and toaster wire, right? And there's a reason for that, because we need to use very common materials at very low cost, and we need to be able to build a company right from the beginning that is suitable for infrastructure scale finance, right? For project finance. And the reason why we know that is because we've been trying to do this for 20 years, right? And so now they have, and so my point is, there's a role for everyone. Doesn't matter age, doesn't matter geography. Everyone's skills are needed, and I do think that there is a place for everyone to participate and create positive impact.
Okay, thank you very much for this interview. So people can find you at your newsletter, your podcast. Can we have all those links in our podcast notes? Can you
Absolutely.
send me an email,
Yeah,
and I'll make it available in the podcast notes? Is that
absolutely.
okay?
Yeah. Happy
Great.
to do it. Yeah. And thank you for having me. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, and see you soon. Bye bye.
Looking to fund radical innovation? Want up to 4 million euros to test ideas others call impossible? This might be the one EU call you don't want to miss. Let's talk about the EIC Pathfinder Challenges 2025, specifically Challenge 0104. The European Innovation Council is backing bold ideas that can shape entire industries. This isn't incremental research. It's for projects that aim to create proof-of-principle breakthroughs from low TRLs up to TRL 3 or 4. The goal? To lay the scientific foundation for radically new technologies, whether in cancer diagnostics, AI medicine, autonomous robotics for construction, or circular chemistry using waste. Eligible applicants include smaller consortia with a minimum of 2 eligible entities, single applicants like research centres or universities, and larger consortia when justified by project ambition. It's open to a wide range of EU member states and associated countries, but partnerships must comply with Horizon Europe rules. Here's the good part. Up to 4 million euros per project. The deadline is October 29th, 2025 at 1700 Brussels time. Higher grants may be awarded if justified. In total, the budget for all Pathfinder challenges in 2025 is 120 million euros, according to the EIC Work Programme 2025. You'll need to validate the scientific basis of your idea, achieve early proof of concept, and contribute to EIC's mission goals, such as sustainability or autonomy in critical technologies. You'll also get access to business acceleration services and potential booster grants to explore commercial pathways. This is your chance to shape the technologies of tomorrow before they go mainstream. The catch? Your project needs to be bold, transformative, and well-structured. Think you're ready? Visit the EU Funding and Tenders portal for full details and application materials. This is the EU betting big on visionary ideas. Now the question is, are you in?
InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles, is a weekly video podcast. Please subscribe to the Polixox newsletter to receive every podcast episode. And if you like receiving it, please press like in whatever platform you are watching or listening. Also, please share InnovEU and Polixox with anyone you feel will enjoy it. Credits: author and host Fernando C. Gaspar, music Hugo Gaspar, Lisbon, Portugal, 2024. Reach us by email or DM.